be your moderator today because I feel that there's so much to discuss. I don't know if we will be able to condense everything in 1 hour. Siguro meron pang susunod na diplomatic hours in the coming future. But I'm very happy because I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion today on different things, and most especially how are we going to evolve, adapt, be better under this what's so-called new normal, whatever that new normal will be. And yeah, what does it mean for us, for individuals, for the Filipino people, for our world, no? And what can we do to stay ahead of the game? Today, I'm joined by three amazing people, intellectuals, people who are actually doing the work on the ground, but at the same time, continuing education and teaching young students, young people, the next generation of leaders. I'd like to introduce all of them first, and then we'll begin our free-flowing discussion on different topics. So our first panelist or member of the panel, of course, is none other than Ambassador Laura Cambao del Rosario, or Ambassador Lula. She is the 9th president of Miriam College. She is a distinguished career diplomat with an outstanding track record of 37 years in the Philippine Foreign Service, culminating in her appointment as Undersecretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs. Her committed work in the government was recognized with the Gawad Kamanong Presidential Award, or the Grand Cross, for her work in economic diplomacy in 2012, and the Sikatuna Presidential Award for her work as chair of the Senior Officials Meeting for the APEC Manila Summit in 2016. She served in various capacities in Philippine embassies abroad, including Vienna, Singapore, and Washington, D.C., her last appointment being as Philippine ambassador to India and Vietnam. Upon retirement, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Merit. A dedicated educator and academic leader, she started her professional career at Miriam College, where she taught literary studies, swiftly moving up to the director of admissions of the college. She continues to serve her alma mater as a trustee of the Miriam College Board, evidence of her strong love and desire to serve the school. Ambassador Del Rosario's work as Director General of the Foreign Service Institute of the DFA from 2009 to 2011, with focus on strategic studies, that's a difficult word, strategic studies and training of DFA personnel, or our future ambassadors. And international perspective will deeply enhance the school's present academic offerings and expand external educational partnerships at Miriam College's contribution to the development of the national human resources. So Ambassador Lula, thank you very much for joining us today and for leading this discussion. Our next panel member is none other than Dr. Aaron Jed Rabena, or Dr. Jed. He is a research fellow at the Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress, a foreign policy think tank, a consultant at Caucus Incorporated, a business and government relations consulting firm, and a member of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations. His area of interest includes another difficult strategic studies, East Asian geopolitics and multilateral politics, political risk, and Chinese politics and foreign policy. Dr. Rabena is the program coordinator for the Bachelor of Arts in Global Affairs and Diplomacy, major in Economic and Political Diplomacy. And so, Dr. Jed, welcome. Our last but not the least, is Dr. Miguel Dorotan. He is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Improving Health Outcomes, or IHO. He is a medical director who specializes on public health in emergencies and disasters. He works in various humanitarian emergencies, including Super Typhoon Yolanda, the Nepal earthquake, the Marawi siege, the Rohingya refugee crisis, and others. He is the program coordinator for the BAGD, or the Bachelor of Arts in Global Affairs and Diplomacy, major in humanitarian diplomacy. So again, Ambassador Del Rosario, Dr. Jed, and Dr. Miguel, thank you again for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good to see you, Dr. Zach.
Great. Yeah. I'm not the doctor, just Zach. Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. Maybe if I can throw the first question for Ambassador Del Rosario, or for Ma'am Del Rosario. Can you just tell us briefly why you came up with this idea for a diplomatic hour? What do we want to, impart to our participants today? We're joined by students from Miriam College and our other audience members.
I think it's really the idea of these two young gentlemen with me now. I recruited them and they have their own stories, how I got to know them. But I think at one point I was I think I just wanted our students to know what diplomacy really is. Because everybody knows what international relations are, what international studies mean, but what is diplomacy? Okay, now we're coming from three different perspectives. In the case of Jed, he's really into the political economic aspect, the political economy of relations, while Migs is into the humanitarian aspect. Whenever we have crisis or pandemics, somehow the multilateral organizations move. Some people might not be aware of it. Multilateral organizations like APEC and ASEAN, we have an arrangement for humanitarian diplomacy because we realize that the 21st century will bring a lot of pandemics, will bring a lot of climate related disasters.
And you mentioned it, no? We're under a global pandemic, and there are so many things. There's so many moving parts that are happening around the world. Not only because we have to solve the public health crisis, but now we also have the economic crisis that we have to address.
Mm-mm.
I guess this is a question for all of you. In your view, maybe just let's get start with the top overview, a bird's eye view. What is happening in this world today? How is this pandemic changing our society or the world as we know it? No, who would like to start? Maybe Doc Miguel.
Thank you, Zach. Magandang hapon sa lahat. Good afternoon, Ambassador Jed. And to all our students right now of the PAGP Pioneer Batch, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. And we're very much happy that you are joining us today with others, some colleagues as well in the area of humanitarian diplomacy as well as economic diplomacy. How Tanong mo, Zach, no? How does the pandemic changing the way we are doing things right now? Masyadong malaman at hindi ko alam kung saan tayo magsisimula. But as I said, yung program natin now, actually, if you look at it, this pilot episode is talking about a new program for the new normal. In essence, there's a shift in all, aspects of our society right now. And if ever man, to keep my answer short, is that it's changing how we actually interact with each other. That's one major thing that's changing. From the Filipino society is very familial, very close knit, in terms of how we interact with each other, and we visit a lot of our relatives so often, and now it's changing in the way that we don't do gatherings as much as we want. But at the same time, it also opened up a lot of opportunities to actually talk to distant relatives through technology. So as to its impact to mental health and the way we interact, marami pang pwedeng magbago.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we still haven't seen the end of that change yet. I think as we approach Christmas, it will be a very, very different Christmas. Ibang Pasko ngayon, no? How about Jed? What do you think is the biggest change that's happening now?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zach, and good afternoon as well to Ambassador Lula and Migs. So for me, I guess from a strategic and political standpoint, what I see is that we are seeing an escalation or a worsening of great power rivalry, in particular between the United States and China. And I think even before the pandemic, there was already a strategic competition between the US and China. But I think COVID-19 accelerated it because, when COVID-19 erupted, broke out in Wuhan, there was the questions about China's political legitimacy, about the transparency of their political system, was actually brought to the fore. So right now, because of COVID-19, China's image and reputation all over the world became tarnished. It was really put in a negative light. So what we see now is that China, for its part, to save itself, they embarked on the so-called mask diplomacy, including us. They gave us a lot of masks, ventilators, and now what they're doing is they're trying to accelerate this vaccine diplomacy. And it's not just actually China, but we also have the other major powers like Russia, the United States. So this is what's happening right now. And I would say that, I guess, for the Philippines, maybe for the way I see it in our foreign policy, putting it into context of our foreign policy, of the Duterte government's foreign policy, is that there is, in a way, a practice of an independent foreign policy. Why do I say this? I think it's because, the government secured or negotiated to have supplies not just from the United States, but also from China, Russia, and other countries. And I think we would also notice that, when Japan gave us the Avigan, the drug, China followed through by lobbying for their traditional Chinese medicine called the what do you call this? Lianhua Qingwen. And India made a phone call to President Duterte stating that they will give us cheap access to cheap medicines. So in a sense, what we see here is that on our part, we're not just reliant to secure vaccines from one country and medicines from one country, but on multiple countries.
Great. And you mentioned something. You mentioned about vaccine diplomacy. Let's get more into that later. Ambassador Lula, do you agree? Is there anything else you want to add in terms of how this is affecting us? Maybe Filipinos are all over the world, no? So in one way or another, we're going to be
Yeah.
affected by this pandemic. We
Okay.
will be different.
Yeah.
We won't be the same as before.
Yes. And Zach, what I'm worried about, thinking only in terms of our national territory, I'm just thinking of the Filipinos here, not about the Filipinos abroad. The pandemic really has widened the gap between those who can afford to go to school and those who cannot. The private schools and those who have the resources, they were able to go online. We were able to adjust. We were agile enough to convert ourselves into virtual classrooms. And we left behind millions of school children in the public sector, and we'll continue to leave them behind. That's why it alarms me when the president says we cannot go until we have a vaccine. The danger here is that we have, how many students do we have at any given time? 2 million, 3 million? If we go on like this and we know that we won't find a vaccine that will really address the threats until almost everybody's vaccinated, and it will take time before developing countries get vaccinated, because the developed countries will do theirs first because they're the ones who are doing the vaccines, and you have to produce 2 doses per person, okay? Now, assuming we get it, they say that developing countries will get their vaccines after 2 years. So that means at the earliest 2022, at the later part 2023. And meanwhile, within the next 2 to 3 years, what will you do with the students who cannot go to school? I'm worried that we will have a generation of poorly educated and uneducated people. And then the time will come when our country will really need leaders who can think. We will be caught flat-footed. I really worry that 20 years from now, our country might really suffer some kind of degeneration economically, politically, because the leadership is not available. That to me is the most serious aspect of this pandemic.
Yes, of course, ma'am. And you talked about education being such a critical gap that we already had problems even before the pandemic, and now those problems are
Yes.
deepened or
Doubled.
accelerated by this
Yeah,
pandemic.
right. Yeah.
So I guess the next question would be is, what can we do now, considering this is the situation? The pandemic will be around for a while. The vaccines won't be readily available until maybe the end of the next year or even later on. What should we be thinking about today for tomorrow? In terms of education, let's talk about education.
Education first.
Yeah.
We really have to think in terms of how can we do an effective mass education. The way I see it is, I think the public school teachers cannot do it. But what if we have a centralized system of educating people? I'm thinking of a public television channel that will teach all subjects, and you have the best teachers there from kindergarten to grade 12, all right? So I don't know how many subjects there are. And so people will shift to TV, because I think the television is a more affordable technology, isn't it, compared to having your own laptop, having your own computer. I hope I'm not being naive here. And for those who cannot, maybe even the TV lessons, if they teach them and if they can be assisted by radio, because because you know, I'm thinking of TV and radio because in Australia, maybe 50 years ago, they taught their students in the bush, as they call them, via radio, right? So the Australian in the bush who had no neighbor within the next 50 miles was learning how to read, write, and compute through the radio. And at the same time, I'm also thinking if you have the radio or TV run by, do they still have television run by batteries? Meron pa ba? No, because I'm thinking, I was
Video.
reading, yeah, because I was reading a report before my investiture. And I not somebody I read a report from PIDS, these are the economic reports. Ano pala, 17% of the Philippines is not yet electrified. Can you imagine that? And to think electricity is the second industrial revolution. The first one was the industrial revolution of the steam engine. Second was electricity. Number three is computer. Number four is, where are we now? Artificial intelligence. The whole world is the fourth industrial revolution. We have not yet completed the second. Hindi pa tayo fully, electrified. So I said, and here we are talking about artificial intelligence and computer and internet. So even in our own country, there's a big divide. The urban cities are running forward, trying to run with the West, and our poor people in rural areas are being left behind. Look, I'm sounding so parang so pessimistic, no? But I think this is what we have to focus and see how we can address this nationally, on a national scale. We really have to ramp up our education delivery system, okay, through other forms of media. Okay.
Zach, if I may, no, I think also that's one reason, and all these challenges is a reason why Miriam College, through the president's office, have launched the School of Diplomacy, and particularly looking at the different fronts of economic, political, and diplomacy, as well as humanitarian diplomacy, because these are your biggest challenges in the next years. No? So even before the global pandemic happened, we've already talking about this program. And we need to hone more people on the, you would call it the science of diplomacy. That we want really, with the aim of the Bachelor of Arts in Global Diplomacy, it's not just looking at your local problems, but also the global problems. Because the solution with every problem, sabi natin, nandiyan rin ang solution. So, isa sa mga, what do you call it, drive niyan is that electricity, again, pwede natin buhayin yan. And national government now needs to fund more resources towards electrifying those areas, other areas na hindi maratingan.
Yeah. And it's true, Zach. I'm sorry if I jump in. When we designed the humanitarian affairs, we were thinking of pandemics. And when we planned this, it was exactly 12 months ago, November, di ba? And then in March, February, the COVID would strike. Parang, tamang-tama ang aming planning, no? So if you have students who are in humanitarian affairs, they will get into the stream of pandemics, crossing borders and aiding.
And I think that, if I may add, I think the value of both being able to look at it at a strategic level and what is happening globally, but connect it down to specific problems.
Yeah.
And as you said, remote areas of the Philippines where those who are marginalized or poor do not have access even to the basic necessities like the internet, which is now a basic necessity.
Yeah.
That skill will be very valuable. For the students who are here today, I think if you're developing that skill, that's what the kind of skills that we need in this world, more of rather than less of those strategic thinkers, but locally connected.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, actually, let's try to saddle education and the response to crises now. How do you think we can do better? We always talk about resilience and being better at responding to disasters or other crises, whether it's natural disasters or economic crises. What is missing? Because we keep on talking about recovery, building back better, but somehow I don't know. Is it implementation? Is it education, better understanding of why the Philippines is where we are? That's a very high concept question, but maybe we can ground it into certain things like climate change or our disaster infrastructure. What is it that we need to be working on also in that new way of addressing a thing, which is crisis? How about Jed? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. To my observation, Zach, I think that COVID-19 showed so many vulnerabilities about our political system, about our the agencies of our government leaders. You know, take one example. When yeah, the government had a plan. They had a plan to impose a lockdown. But let's take a look at how it was carried out. I mean, nothing against them, but I mean, just objectively, just in hindsight. You in other countries when they impose lockdowns, they don't give 48 hours leeway, for to announce it to the public. So you see what happened was that these people rushed to the bus stations, to the airports, to the you know transport hubs everywhere, and without masks. So who would have known that all you need is one positive person in that area. So that's how you create super spreaders. So essentially that's just one example. We have plans. I think government. I think needs to be done in terms of like enforcement, in terms of execution. Yeah, and I guess we would know how successfully we are if we compare what we've done, vis-a-vis other ASEAN countries, compared with our neighbors. For example, Vietnam. Vietnam is like virtually unscathed by COVID-19. They acted early on, and some would even say that it's their paranoia of China that that made them act early on.
Yeah, it
So
was a China virus.
yes, and other countries as well. Thailand, they were able to manage their COVID crises. So these are lessons for us, basically. That we have to act early on and execute well, and yeah, integrate this as we uh, going forward, in facing future challenges.
Thank you. How about the others? Your thoughts on how do we respond to crisis and what we can learn?
um, I think you know what worries me also, Zach. If you look at okay, Jed can contradict me here. My hypothesis might be wrong. Whenever there's a country that goes through a lot and a national trauma, so to speak, or a national fear, they tend to elect a leader who is populist, meaning who will tell them, I will take care of your problems. I understand you. And I think that's what made Trump win, because he was able to get the pulse of the Americans who are really getting left behind, in the economic development of the country, the 1% versus the 99%. And the ones who were left behind were the white American males, okay? And people say you compare Hitler. That's how Hitler won in Germany. In fact, sometimes you wonder, ang galing-galing ng mga Aleman, and they're the most competitive scientific thinkers in the world. Why did they elect Hitler? Have you ever thought of that? How can such a, well-informed, well-educated people elect a Hitler, or in that descriptive sense, to be the leader of their country? And it's because Hitler was able to tap on their fears and on their own dissatisfaction over the Versailles Treaty. They felt that they were inapi, di ba? Ng mga allies. So ganun din tayo. You know what I'm afraid of is that somebody might come and say, I'll take care of you. And then before you know it, this person will become an autocratic leader, and they will destroy the democratic institutions. I mean, it's bad enough right now. What is bad is that we are becoming, wala na sa atin yung multi-party system, di ba? Parang as soon as you have a president, everybody jumps to his party. Nagiging one party government tayo. Yun lang, I may be wrong, but sometimes in my lonely moments, I get crazy ideas. Okay. Jed, baka pwede mo akong contradict doon, because our students might get my foolish ideas. Please give a counter.
Actually, I agree, ma'am. That's how populists are. That's how they get the support of the public. And I think right now, ma'am, in the case of President Duterte, he knows how to speak the language of the masses. I think that's why he continues to remain popular.
Mm.
Um, I think he's like with ano, ma'am, I mean, even before Donald Trump lost. So they know how to speak the language of of the masses. And yeah, so but as to how the electorate will judge him, ma'am, I guess is we'll see in the next elections, ma'am.
Yeah.
If the one he'll endorse will win or
Yeah,
lose.
yeah, yeah. But going back to Trump, Trump had 70 million votes versus the 75.5 million votes of Biden. So their difference is just 5.5 million. So that means Trump still has a big following, right? I mean, the message is still there, even if he lost.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, the populist message. Besides, their problems have not yet been solved, and they don't trust Biden to solve their problems.
And this trust, no, which we talk about, that's we do you still believe that's essential in governance in good institutions? It seems that even the populist leaders distrust their own government institutions. No, like Trump is casting doubt on the electoral system in the U.S. In the Philippines, we also have doubts about the electoral system cast by rival parties. Is there no end in sight for this kind of institution destruction? How do we rebuild these kinds of institutions so that public trust is renewed in government, if that's still possible in these difficult times?
Yeah, the cynicism, right?
Hmm.
I think we start first with the pandemic, like MIGS. Do you suppose people will agree to a vaccine? Until everybody's vaccinated, we're not safe. What do you think, MIGS? The trust should start in that field.
Well, paano ba? Masalimuot pag-usapan ng vaccine and even the trust rate, trust when you talk about trust in the vaccines. No? Post the vaccine, the what do you call it, the vaccination rate went down, and we have yet to what do you call it, recovered from that. And here we are again. Well, dapat as early as now we've started planning for the vaccination. No? To be honest, hindi ko alam. Unless we have, not even, I wouldn't say people in government anymore, but to have those people, leaders in the community that people actually trust. No? Hindi ko alam, do we actually need to go back to basics of finding those people that in the ground that more people would actually believe in. I don't know if I'm making sense, but we've been talking about policies, we've been talking about government, and accountability, etc. But I think we also need to start working on the grassroots level.
Yeah.
Grassroots organizing, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mabigat yan, ha?
Yeah.
That's hard. You mean building trust from the grassroots level? That's heavy.
Yeah. But if I think, ma'am, kasi if our problem is our leaders, where else do we go to? And our educational institutions at the moment, as you said kanina, challenged then, di ba?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that means we really need to have a good template on organizing communities and see how we can govern from down up, bottom up, no?
Well, in some ways, I think, if I may interrupt lang, I think in some ways we've seen local governments, provincial governments, for example, or city governments responding even better than national government, especially when it comes to delivery of basic services or testing, for example. Before there was a national testing effort, you had local governments rolling out testing on the ground. So maybe there is hope would you agree? Would you panelists agree? Like if we focus on local governance, developing local government leaders, good local government
Gmail.
leaders, then that
Google.
creates ripple effects all over the country.
Yeah, definitely, Zach. We've seen a lot of local government units, doing the right thing. And I think in the future, that's the way to go rin naman talaga. Dami tayong examples, diba? We in our work in the COVID Action Network, diba? So we've been hearing a lot of different LGUs like Pasig, Valenzuela, who have been fighting off COVID, in their own little ways.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the funding will be there by 2020, diba?
Okay, yeah. But at the same time too, Zach, I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about the local governments. There are a few outstanding leaders, diba? But then maybe if we can somehow make them see as samples how these leaders are handling their own communities, so that the other towns and barangays will be able to get some kind of an idea on how to do it. And that is one way. The other way, on the other hand, is there are also, I don't know, is it true that there's some people who enrich themselves because of the pandemic? Is it true that there are some barangay leaders who also dip their dirty fingers into the ayuda funds? So these people are preparing for the next election. So you have two kinds of leadership. So I hope that when election time comes, our young people will be in the movement for a real change, because I think change can only come from the Gen Z right now and from some of the millennials, because otherwise, if you don't do it right now, I mean, we have 2 years to prepare and say, look, this is the kind of leader that we want. So you point to somebody else who did a good job, and so that we will have a different kind of standard for political leadership. If people will be made aware of this, that we will not take just anybody, then perhaps there is hope. Otherwise, if we keep our cynical attitude, pare-pareho lang yan eh. Tanggapin mo na yung 1,000 dito, tanggapin 1,000 doon. After all, whoever wins, pareho din naman. That's the extreme case of cynicism.
I'd like to go to the questions in the chat because I think it's connected to what we're discussing now. This question is from Mirma Tika Ortiz. What kind of leader does the Philippines need now given the pandemic, the change in leadership in the US, China's assertiveness, and other factors that affect us today? And maybe we can talk about the leaders at the national level, but also in connection with what we were talking about earlier, leaders at the local level as well. What kind of leaders do we need or do we deserve?
Someone you could actually trust.
Okay. Sorry, ako lagi nagsasalita eh. Pasensya na ha. But I will try to answer that together the question of Nico. It says, all public officials, when they try to win elections, ako ang may sagot sa problema nyo. I hope we can get through a vetting process. It's not just anybody who is foisted before us, yun lang ang ating iboboto, di ba? Wala tayong vetting process eh. We don't go through the primaries that the Americans do when they vote for their president. Well, despite it, of course, they got Donald Trump. But at least it shows that Donald Trump really had an influence on 70 million people. Yun, that was proven. But for us, ang pumipili yung leadership ng party eh. Now, this might not be, I don't know how this will work, but in Vietnam, they vet them according to their degrees. So one time I was there when they held their national parliamentary election. All their candidates had master's degrees. I couldn't believe it. So I said, so they gave them, like for instance, let's say Jed and Migs are running for the same position in one political unit. Both of them have master's degrees, and you choose between the two of them. Ganon kabigat yung qualifications ng kanilang mga kandidato. I think if the young people will say, we will not take anybody who does not know what he's talking about, we will not take anybody who comes from political dynasty, siguro hindi basta-basta tatakbo yung mga tao eh. Ang lakas ng loob because there's no pushback. If you push back and say, no, ayaw na namin yan, tama na yan. We want a new kind of leadership. So we want somebody who is like this mayor from this particular town. You think it will work?
I'd like to challenge ma'am yung sinabi niyo of betting, like the examples of having master's degree, etc. or when PhD. No? Baka i-clarify lang natin, it's not all about
yes, I know.
Yeah. Kasi we've had several presidents who are brilliant.
Yeah.
Look what happened to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think that's the extreme. And it's true. I think you're referring to Marcos, right?
Not only him.
Okay. All right. Okay, I take my words back. But I think what I wanted to show is that the Vietnamese did a vetting. You know, they went through academic qualifications, they went through the leadership experience. Kasi if you're known to be a bolero and if you're known to have dirty fingers, why should you be there? And they went to 1 year. Yung vetting process niya, it's 1 year. Sa atin, pipiliin lang ng party leadership and within 3 months, nandiyon na yung kandidato mo. Yun lang. So, okay, Miriam said voters' education is really so important. It is true. But I think we have to start now. We have 2 years. 2 years to go.
Maybe might even be a bit, we're behind the time because we actually have to start 4 years before an election to really educate the next generation.
Yeah.
So we have to catch up.
Oh. And then Aaron knows me for always saying this, and he might be in a better position again to say, di ba we expect Manchurian candidates? Okay, tumango siya. There will be Manchurian candidates.
Manchurian candidate.
Yes, can we explain that a bit, Jed?
Yeah, Mr. Zach, Manchurian candidates, basically, these are candidates of foreign powers. Or what we say in Filipino, sila yung manok ng foreign powers. So once they're in power, they basically would be subservient to, or be obedient to the interests of they'll be beholden to that foreign power.
Yeah.
So
but they get funding.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Ma'am, just to add to what you mentioned about our democracy, I think there are several major weaknesses of our democracy. One is that, we have this political dynasty, the issue of political butterflies, which just goes to show, that we lack a principled political parties here in our country. And what happens sometimes is, the difference between advanced democracies and developing democracies is, in the latter, they tend to vote based on popularity. Well, of course, it matters. When you look for a candidate, you really they should be known to you. Of course, they have to be popular. But this goes to what Mom said. This relates to what Mom said about Vietnam, because the same is true in the case of China. When they promote leaders in China, they look at their credentials at the local levels. How is this person as a mayor, as a county leader, as a village leader? If the GDP of this particular village improved under that person's stint, then he can be promoted. If he was able to reduce inequality in his region or in his province, then he can be promoted. So that's how they, they assess. So it's not just a popularity. And I think, many in the US, or many analysts say that the US is very divided right now, very fragmented. And I don't think we're any different, even if we have a multi-party system. In fact, one could even argue that we're even more fragmented because of our multi-party political system. In our country, you win the plurality of votes, not the majority vote. So it's not the 50% plus. So what happens is that if this president wins, he does not have the mandate of the majority. Because the framers of the 1987 Constitution deemed that to be more democratic, you have to be as inclusive as possible. But then, as things stand right now, I guess the we can be the judge.
Great points, everyone. Okay, given all that we've talked about so far, and given I would say, the slim chances that the Philippines will be able to vaccinate a majority of its population by end of next year, um, what can we do? I would say, what can we do differently? How can we return to some kind of normalcy? Because we know that the economy is not going to be good this year, but people need to live, people need to work, people need to earn money for a living. So let's think about the concrete things that need to happen. So the government, for example, what does the government need to do next year or within the next few 6 months, no, so that the economy can get back to life, but people can still be safe, and we learn how to live with this virus.
Do you want, Jed, what do you think on the
Yes, ma'am.
political level?
Ma'am, you first, ma'am.
Hmm. Honestly, I really don't know. I think it's almost like I'm thinking of a provincial or town quarantine, meaning let's not cross borders. It's almost like if we can protect a certain group, like I mean we go around, but it's just a certain perimeter, so that I'm just thinking of the transportation spreader that Jed mentioned when people went home to the provinces, when the overseas workers went home to the provinces, nobody was safe anymore, right? But I don't know whether it will work. And because I'm always looking at what is happening even in Europe, there's a second wave happening. And at the same time, what I'm looking at is the supply chain. Because I don't know how you experience it, but here in Quezon City, our supply chain became centralized in Quezon City. Meaning we get our fruits and vegetables not from Baguio anymore, but from the UP area, yung ganun ba? So that you know that it's just around you. So if you do it in terms of clusters and bubbles, I call it bubble. And even in the schools, maybe if we bubble ourselves, meaning if we can be assured that our families do not really crisscross, and then we can have our own physical presence already, then it can be done. On the other hand, what on the business side, perhaps we have to improve our delivery system, um, so that if we have this, I'm thinking in terms of Amazon, like not as big as Amazon, but Amazon like distributors, so that you order from a central place and then you have people who will distribute whatever you need. But this will require supply chain management and logistics. And I don't know whether we can handle those. It still goes back to our own managerial capacity and our own organizational capacity. So in a way, I'm lost, just like the rest of mankind.
Ambassador Jed or Miguel?
Yeah, I guess two things, Zach. Number one, I think the government needs to continue to be strict in enforcing, the quarantine protocols. Because if the government would tend to be lax on being strict on this, I think it's gonna jeopardize again not only the health of our countrymen, but also the health of our economy. So there really needs to be, we have to have a zero tolerance policy against pasaways, and at the same time we really should look after the needs of the needy, because so many people have become unemployed. So the government really needs to make sure that um, that the basics, the what they need, the necessities are being provided to them. Second, I think is that the government should really um, make sure that once vaccines are available, they would be made accessible to the public as quick as possible. Because if we do that, and then I think that would expedite the recovery of our economy and the return of our country to normalcy.
And it should be a free market in vaccine. It should not be dictated by the government that we only buy from one country.
Yes.
I mean, if there are 12 vaccines available, we should be allowed to import all of them, and each one will choose, the vaccine that they would like to get. Otherwise,
Yes, ma'am.
I might die without a vaccine if if I don't trust the vaccine manufacturer. I mean, ganun na rin ako ngayon siguro. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And and speaking of the vaccines, how do we determine who should be getting that vaccine first? I mean, is there a priority list that the government is thinking about now, or is it just, do we just assume that whoever can get access to the vaccine will get access to the vaccine? I mean, there's so many questions around that, aside from the supply chain logistics problem of it. There's a question actually from Ida in the chat. Do you think the focus on vaccine diplomacy is being manufactured by vaccine development capable countries? And given that we're not one, how should we navigate this? Jed, earlier you mentioned that the Philippines can, kind of navigating this by maintaining relations with all of these countries that could potentially provide a vaccine. But are we also maybe being drawn into their own politics somewhat? People that are trying to be more friendly with the Philippines for whatever reason?
Yeah. Well, there have been arguments, Zach, that there are some worries that China might use this for geopolitical ends. So how can we avoid that? We can avoid that by hedging our bets. So we don't just get vaccines from China. We get from the UK, we get from the United States, from Russia and Australia or whatever. So we get from all these countries. And for these countries, especially for China, Russia, and the United States, it's like the Cold War now. They're in a way employing vaccine diplomacy because these are status symbols for them. These are signs of prestige. Just like during the Cold War, the space race and the arms race. So right now, there's even greater incentive for China to engage in this because the virus originated in their country. So they want to avoid all this negativity, this bad image that they got from COVID-19. And as for the United States, they want to show that they're still providing public goods. They are still a world leader. So they want to make this available to many countries because many countries still look up to them.
Yeah.
Zach,
Now,
if I may,
sige, Migs, ikaw. Sige.
Go ahead, Miguel.
if I may weigh in on the discussion on the vaccines, and coming from the different countries. Let's not forget the scientific basis or the scientific backing of all these vaccines. Meron kasing international standards. Without naming those other countries, but there are some that doesn't actually follow the international standards. So somehow the international community, scientific community is quite worried about those kinds of vaccines. Because it cannot be like, it's the same thing as with your testing capacity na pumasok karamihan early onset. But it doesn't mean that a test that's been could be used widely. Diba? Also answering on the question that kanina ni raised, Jed raised about prioritization of who should get its first, diba? Meron naman tayong protocols, right? Again, we go back to the rationality of why we need vaccine, and for every step that we want to prioritize to do, my reasoning or my science behind it. So we know that the COVID-19, actually data natin sa Pilipinas, 98%, 97 to 98% are just mild cases. But it's around 3% who goes into critical situation, and around possibly around less than 2% of that group dies. And that's around less than 2% ang mortality rate natin in the Philippines. And these are the vulnerable populations. So of course, in terms of prioritization, you want to prioritize those. And you also want to prioritize the frontliners who actually could take care of the greater population. Diba? So meron naman steps tayong ginagawa na yan. And again, it's also the question lang kung susundin ba yung protocols na yun.
Yeah. Because you know what is frightening is that baka dadaan sa political palakasan, di ba? But that's why I said that if it's a free market approach, meaning we get all the best vaccines that have been proven and tested and make them available in the market so that the Filipinos or even the Department of Health should also be able to make the best decision for the Filipinos, because ang problema kasi if it's the DOH making the decision is for the masses, di ba? But for individual patients, we hope that we can have the freedom to choose the best among the best. But what worries me is that there's this discussion with pharmaceuticals when they ask them how would they price the vaccines. And they say they will price them according to the amount of money they spent to develop it. And that's frightening because, you know, you have to wait until the prices go down. That means if you're among the first ones to get it, the prices will still be high, right? So as years go by, the prices will go low. Now this is, as I said, even shocking, because Jonas Salk, you know, the scientist, Jonas Salk, the scientist who invented penicillin or who discovered penicillin, he gave up the royalty on penicillin. That's why when penicillin was propagated, you know, to take care of all the antibiotics and everything else in the world, it was not expensive. But the scientists now who are doing the vaccines, they're not going to give up their intellectual property rights. So it's going to be an expensive vaccine. That's another political issue.
Not to mention, ma'am, that the logistics of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing you have to look at. No?
Yeah,
like for example, like for example, the Moderna vaccine, you need a negative temperature of cold chain to transport it.
Yeah.
Store it. And we know.
Yeah, the logistics. Yeah.
We have around 70% of the Philippines still not doesn't have electricity. So how can you gonna move it there, right? So
yeah, I mean the storage will be a problem. And then of course each person needs 2 doses. So for the Filipinos, we need 240 million doses. It's a huge, as Mick said, logistical problem. But oh God, I'm beginning to think now. Maybe when we vote for 2022, we should look also at this already. We should be preparing for the infrastructure right now.
Maybe when in the future, when you go to vote, you also get the vaccine. Turn out, or maybe turn out. We'll see.
But ma'am, all of these things is it's actually negotiations, no?
Yeah, it's really negotiations. If our government knows how, and if our negotiators are not thinking of a commission, kasi yung problema they're thinking, okay, what is in it for me, di ba? Or how much commission can I get from this transaction?
Sana naman hindi. No? I'd like to shift gears a bit because there are some interesting questions in our chat room, and I think we should, address some of these questions. I think one question is from Rafael Katulin. She's talking about, and I'm assuming Rafael, you are a she, talking about diplomacy in the age of fake news and in the age of technology. We have global platforms like Facebook, Twitter, TikTok that are also in some kind of geopolitical battle because TikTok is a Chinese app versus Facebook and Twitter, and now it's like they're all battling for dominance, for attention for users. No, how do you think diplomacy plays a role in this growth of technology and the use of technology and the cross borders that this technology has on us, the cross border influence of these technologies, these social media platforms?
Okay. Jed, you want to try that first?
Ma'am? Okay, ma'am. My take on that, ma'am, is Well, I guess the with the advancement of technology that we have right now, it's easy to um, purvey fake news. Yeah, that's our fake news, and become a peddler of or propagate disinformation actually. So with disinformation, what you do essentially is that you can rupture societies, and the political milieu of a country. You can also, in a way, um, destroy that. So I think the good thing with our country right now is that, as a sign of our vibrant democracy, is that we still have a free and a vigilant press, media. We can see this in the likes of PCIJ, um, and Rappler. They do fact checks. So this is good. So that we can distinguish what is true and what is false. And at the same time, there's also Facebook has it's a double-edged sword, for Facebook.
Yeah, yeah,
Facebook. Some would say that Facebook has empowered so many false influencers,
yeah,
but some would say that Facebook has empowered the voices of the minority. So it's double edged. So what I guess we can advise the youth is that they should they should diversify, I guess, their sources. On the internet right now, it's very easy to do that.
yeah,
When you, let's say, if you read, just an example, if you read the Philippine Daily Inquirer, why not read the Manila Times as well?
yeah,
If you listen to rapper, why not tune in to PTV, the government's media channel as well? And then you decide, so that you can balance things out. Yeah, that's just fair.
yeah.
Great points.
Okay.
Thank you, Jed.
Yeah.
Ma'am Lula.
In my case, I really think that we should also try to go on the media as a source, because there's some people who don't read mainstream media anymore. They just focus on their Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you know how these platforms work. They work on algorithms. They let you follow what you're interested in, and pretty soon you get deeper and deeper into your initial beliefs, isn't it? You just get the side of what you started reading about. All you have to do is open your YouTube. Your YouTube will show you all the things that you're interested in. Parang you become a prisoner of your own ideas if you don't get out into the mainstream media who can fact check you. And I think that's that's where diplomacy comes in. As a diplomat, we don't rely only on media. Otherwise, everybody can do diplomacy. And sometimes we also have to think that there are state-controlled media. In Singapore, they only have one basic newspaper there versus our 31 at one point. We had 31, 32 in Singapore, only had one, the Straits Times. But when you are abroad, the best thing is really to talk to people on the ground. And then you will see how they think. In Vietnam, when I was there, I didn't speak the language at all. And it's hard to talk to people on the ground because they always assign an interpreter, and that interpreter is actually assigned by the government to interpret for you so that you cannot, they make sure that you do not ask questions, or if you ask questions, they can report you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So what I did was I went to the European and American embassies, the ambassadors, and I said, and I picked those that had what we call overseas development assistance, these ODAs. They fund certain projects at the grassroots level. And the people who work there are the Vietnamese, meaning like in our case, if you go to the Save the Children Foundation, the people who work there are Filipinos and they work in various rural areas in the Philippines. So what I did was I talked to the ambassadors and I talked to your people who are doing grassroots work. And it's the grassroots people who have their ears on the ground. And that's where you get the facts, not the state-run media, just like Vietnam had a state-run media. So Diploma still had a source, but again, you need to do a lot of spade work. In the same way that if you're an ordinary citizen, you cannot go to the grassroots just read a lot of newspapers. If we have 36, try to get at least 5 of them to see, the different angles that can come out about an issue. Okay, I think that was too long. I'm sorry.
But no, very good points, ma'am. Don't just rely on the news media. Get your sources from the ground. Talk to actual people and what they think, and people who don't necessarily believe in the things that you believe in.
Zach, if I may, no, summarize those two things, no, in two things. No. And I think core of your diplomacy and something that we will be teaching in this course, no, of BAGD, sorry, plugging in the program, is on critical thinking and communications. No. Not only communicating yourself, but also how do you actually listen out. No. And critical thinking, as defined, is actually what the ambassador said. No? That you have to look at the different sources of your information. No? At kailangan himayin yung different aspects of those information that you gather. Our role here really as faculty or as our teachers, dati kasi di ba we download information. The source of information of students are coming from the teachers or the textbook. Nowadays, you can Google it. No? Minsan mas mabilis pa yung estudyante kaya sa'yo. That's why the role of your faculty now, and I would like to say that the way that we're going to teach the diplomacy course is on terms of critical thinking. How do you process the information that you have in the internet, the things that you listen to, that you hear, that you see, etc., and make the decisions from yourself. No? Yeah. And mind you lang, caution on the social media. The algorithms, diba, we know that the algorithms actually lets you see more of the things that you want to see. Diba? They filter it already. Diba? So that's why important yung sinabi ni Jed kanina na if you're gonna, like for example, read on one article that you know is left-leaning, then read the same article or the topic on another paper that's more centric or right. Diba? So that you have both views. It's the same thing that pag may narinig kang chismis, double check mo muna kung totoo ba yung source na yon, or you seek the other side before you actually make your own conclusion.
Great. Salamat, Mig, sa plugging. It's always good to plug.
Hey, Mr. Zach.
Yes, Jed, go ahead.
Follow through lang kay Migs.
Sige.
Since Migs mentioned that what the faculty members are expected to do. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I think what would distinguish these diplomacy students from, let's say, non-diplomacy students or a layman is that they will be knowledgeable of theoretical frameworks, concepts, analytical concepts. So they will be more mature in terms of analyzing political, economic, and crisis issues. So this is what would distinguish them.
Okay, I know we don't have enough time for all the other questions, but I think we have one good question here, and I think that could be the last question I throw to everyone here. It's from Gabrielle Opus. She's asking, what can the youth do, or what advice do you give to the youth? I guess to lead the country, because they will inherit the leadership one day. But maybe I can rephrase the question a bit: is what would you like to see the youth do, the next generation of leaders do today? Earlier we talked about what should the government do, what should the leaders of today do. What would you like to see the youth of today or the next generation leaders do and start doing more of, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. If I start, okay, I think I want them to be more involved in issues and not just to worry about grades. When you step out of the universe, which is the classroom and the degree program, there comes a time when people will not look at your grades before they will believe you or not. Okay. And I know that the school is a calling card. That's why everybody wants to go to UP, Ateneo, LaSalle, the top 3. But as you grow into your own expertise, no matter where you come from, people will not ask, where did you graduate from? What matters is that they will see whether you're sincere in what you're doing, whether you are well informed. And I think as long as you develop this discipline of being well informed, as Jed and Mig said, and really being sincere in your objective, so that wherever you are, you have what they call credibility, because credibility is the most important thing. That's why we cannot trust our government, because they are not credible. Now, while I'm answering this, of course, I'd like to hit also what Aliana or Tua asked about farmers. Aside from education, agriculture is one very, very strong area that we should really get involved in. And I know that there are NGOs who are getting involved in improving agriculture. Because in the talk about again pandemics, there are three what we call nexus, the three elements of a nexus. And I think you've heard all of this. What will be affected during the pandemic and climate change? And I hope that the students who are here will consider this as they do their capstone program, as they do their thesis. It will be water, food, and energy. Those three. You have to have some working knowledge of what will happen in the future in these three areas, because this will determine our rate or survival or our rate of collapse. Again, it's energy, water, and food. And all of those, of course, will cover agriculture, that's food. And underlying basis of this all, of course, is education. As I said, I wish we can ramp up our education so that we don't have to be in the classroom to be teaching our students. And I hope the government will really think of a super infrastructure that will cover the whole nation in the same way that we cover, it Bulaga can all cover everybody and Wawawi. Why can't we not do the same for our people so that they will learn more? Okay, I think that's my last word, Zach. Thank you very much for being patient with me. As I said, trying to rein me in next time. Stop me so that I could.
Okay lang yan, ma'am. Dapat nga more than diplomatic hour, maybe diplomatic afternoon. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ambassador Lula. Jed, or yes, Jed.
I'm good, Zach. Yeah.
Okay. Miguel?
Thank you.
Last words sa ba to? Zach?
Yes, last words.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We'll
Mix,
go back
come
to
on.
Jed. Sige, Miguel and then Jed.
Sige. Paano ba? Sige. I'll go back siguro lang to wrap up things. When all of this pandemic and different crises started early this year, there was a question of whether should we focus on economy that will feed the people, or health. There was that debate, na parang it's economy versus health when it comes to quarantine. But as we go along, we said that at the outset, kung the population will be unhealthy and people will be dying, then there's no use of the economy. But eventually, when we realized that somehow the people's behaviors started to change, and now we are ready to open the economy. We said it's health and economy now. Such in a way that you don't have to actually pick one from the other anymore. And so I think my ending statements would be just a reminder to everyone that the crisis is still there and it will continue. We don't know when it will stop, but the solutions is, as cliche as it may sound, but the solutions is still in our hands. The spread of the pandemic is still in our hands in the way we interact with each other. So the Health Professionals Alliance Against COVID recently released the campaign on Apat Dapat. And whatever you do, and especially now that the Christmas season is coming, in terms of gathering, eating out, exploring out, and going out, Apat Dapat. One, if you could practice still the physical distancing of at least 1 meter, wearing your masks, so you could interact safely na, no? Wearing your mask. The third one is that if you're gonna pick a place to eat or interact, choose something that has open ventilation or open fields, for less transmission. And of course, if you can lessen your interaction, the fourth one is the time of interaction. The recommendation is less than 30 minutes so that you will be able to interact and be outside and safely. But sabi, huling hirit, if you cannot do all four, at least aim for the 3 out of the 4 things. So there's a compromise there. And I think that's part of negotiations again and diplomacy. That you cannot have all, but at least aim for something that everybody would be able to live with.
Yeah. They call that negotiated position.
Yeah. Negotiated position, yeah. Exactly, ma'am. So we release the four recommendations, but sige.
Yeah, negotiated position.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Great
Thank
points.
you.
Thank you, Miguel. And Jed?
Okay, Zach, just very quick comments from me. Yeah, I agree with what Mom Lula said when she emphasized that, there's really need for people to have credibility. And I think one way of doing that is, for the youth, they can accumulate as much information as they can. Because if they do that, then you will know how to be objective. If you get your information from varying sources, then you will certainly be informed of the extremes of certain political ideologies, and you will tend to see things, at a much broader scale. So I think it's important for them to be wide readers, and yeah, they can be active in social or political organizations. Yeah, these are the simple things that you can do right now if you're a student. Yeah, so that's just for me. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But by the way, Zach, before you end, I just want to suggest something. First, I want to thank the 3 of you guys for being with me today. But perhaps we can ask our audience right now and our students to suggest topics that they want to talk about. And then we can look for other panelists. But at least they know our format is not a webinar. We are not offering lectures, but we're offering exchanges of ideas. And Zach hopefully will be our regular moderator. So,
Very happy to
so
do it.
yeah, we will suggest, you might wish, the audience might wish to suggest future speakers, okay? So that we can learn from one another. Because to me, exchanging ideas is the best way to learn. And then you will see the different angles, of an idea instead of listening to a lecture with a slide presentation. Okay, so I like the format. Thank you very much to all of you. And thank you for attending this, friends and students and neighbors. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lula. Thank you very much, Jed and Miguel. Obviously, we've only had an hour, but there will be another diplomatic hour, and we hope you can join us. This is definitely less toxic than the comment section on Facebook and on Twitter. So we invite everyone to come back and participate. Thank you so much for the questions, by the way. Ganda ng mga questions nyo. Let's continue this conversation online and with our friends and family. Of course, stay safe and have a good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining the Diplomatic Hour.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Zach.
you. Thank you, Zach. Thank you,
Always
Ma'am.
And
Thank you,
every,
Ma'am.
yeah, it's nice to see you. Okay, so we're now on YouTube, right? It's an FYP. Thank you very much and good afternoon.